This episode is proudly supported by Westholme Australian Wagyu. Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and the Northern Territory, Australia, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. They steward 16 million acres of rangeland, guided by the natural ecosystem where cattle graze and forage on native grasses for the first few years of their lives. The result is high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia. Westholme believe that when nature leads, flavour follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
Concern for suppliers that there might be a house of cards coming when, as we head into these economic times, everybody's just assumed that you can make easy money. Yeah, there's probably more in the marketing departments than the actual hospitality on the floor and in the kitchen.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Many of our guests have expressed how challenging times are in hospitality right now. But just like COVID, there are some that have managed to be agile enough to change things and grow their business. How do you make the best of tough times? Ben Shephard is the owner of Flower Bar in Moss Vale, New South Wales. Ben, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's good to catch up with you. You've got a pumping little venue there in Moss Vale. How are things at the moment?
Yeah, things are pretty good despite the general downturn, I think, across the industry. I think we tend to be holding our head high and punching above our weight, I think.
Tell us a little bit about Flower Bar and what you're doing there.
Yeah, so Flower Bar was, I guess, a concept born out of a friend of mine who was a baker and really wanted to open up a bakery and kept pestering me to help him open a bakery. And we finally found a venue that was amazing, and it was it's an old bank building in the middle of Moss Vale, and in the grand old days when they built banks not as just a little shop front, and so yeah, it already had a liquor license and it was operating as a bottle shop, and we decided to take it on, and it's a bakery, wine bar, bottle shop. We've put in a little deli in the old bank vault called the Deli Vault, and so it's a multi-purpose business, almost what I like to call a modern day general store. Everything you need.
Well, tell us about all of these different sections. Was that the initial plan, or is this, as you grew the business, you've added different parts?
Yeah, as the business grew and as we discovered space, I guess, heading. I've never owned a business before, and for me, I just looked at spaces and what linked, and so sort of, I guess, adding the deli was part of a little something. We wanted to add a retail element, and then we went, well, actually, why don't we go right into cheeses and meats? It fits with sourdough bread, it fits with the bottles of wine, and all just sort of links nicely in.
Does it have its challenges running a venue that's doing sort of three different services and being so multifaceted?
Oh, absolutely. Maintenance is the hardest. You try getting a plumber in at 3 a.m. or after service at 10 o'clock at night. So I guess a lot of businesses get the luxury of closing down, whereas we're open from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. So that all of the little things that happen on days off and stuff like that, that's the biggest challenge. A deep clean of the venue is really hard and more expensive to get done anything we want to get done. But we manage.
Tell us a little bit about Moss Vale, and we'll get into it a bit later. You've worked in the Southern Highlands previously, but tell us what's great about the food scene there and why you've become part of it with Flower Bar.
Yeah, so Moss Vale, Moss Vale's had a lower socio-economic demographic, and over the years traditionally, and but part of that comes opportunity. So property prices compared to the rest of the Highlands is a lot cheaper. So a lot of people moving down from Sydney, starting families in inverted commas the country, and likewise the retail spaces are a lot more affordable. So as a business owner, you can take a lot more risks, and you can be a bit more adventurous with what you do, and the clients that are moving, the customers that are moving to Mossvale, they're they've got a little bit more cash having moved from Sydney, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of growth and a lot of excitement in Mossvale.
There's been a lot of guests talk about the tough climate at the moment in the industry. What's been the impact on you where you are? Have you been affected?
Oh, people told me I was stupid opening 10 months ago, heading into what was going to be economic headwinds. But for me, I've always seen new venues, you get 12 months of what's classed as the honeymoon period. And so for that, I was sort of hoping to, ride through that, those headwinds with that honeymoon period. And, so far, we're still growing. Each week we grow little by little, and we've still got the energy to grow. So I think if you've got the energy to compete in a difficult climate, then you're hopefully set up for when things are a bit easier.
Well, I want to sort of talk about what you're doing there at Flower Bar in greater detail a bit later on, but whereabouts did you grow up, and what sort of role did food play for you?
Yeah, so look, I was born in the Sutherland Shire. Moved down here when my parents, made the tree change when I was about 10. So I moved out of the Highlands and went to school down here. Both my parents were small business owners, so both had separate businesses, and cooking wasn't a huge part of what they did. It was with the advent of chicken tonight and microwave rice, and mum was in her element. So my love for food came about through, there had to be more to food than what I was being served. And, just not speaking out of turn, I've told them this. but I had to go and discover food myself because I wasn't getting satisfied on my palate at home.
Tell us about that adventure. What sort of things did you discover when you went out on that?
Look, I vaguely remember, buying random herbs and just throwing them into mum's microwaved pea, corn and capsicum mix that came out of the freezer, and then bringing home actual vegetables and trying them and just, I guess, discovering them. I got a younger brother and sister, and we used to just discover food together, and we're all actually lovers of food.
Were you always destined for a career in hospitality? Was that the plan, sort of, as you sort of started to think about a career?
Oh, look, from like most people, I think maybe not like most, but I say that I spent the first 10 years of my hospitality career trying to get out of it. But it sort of hit me when I was about 30, and I went, I actually love this. I enjoy it, and I think I'm well suited to it. And so as I've sort of, then I had to work out how I could forge a career in it, as opposed to it being a part-time thing on the side. And I guess I was in Sydney in the early 2000s, and again, there weren't many career hospitality people that I knew, at least. And everyone was it was quite a transient industry, as it sort of is as well. But when I moved to Melbourne, there was such a passion amongst hospitality workers down there that it started to. People were proud to be in hospitality in Melbourne, whereas in Sydney it was almost an apology.
Wow. What were the venues and people that you worked with that had an impact on you in Melbourne that made you have that sort of revelation?
Yeah, so it was just even I'd moved down to Melbourne again, as I say, trying to get out of hospitality. I had a nice full-time sales job traveling around the country, but as I've always done, if ever I've found a job outside of hospitality, I've always had a part-time job on the side, and that's so I worked at a pub down in Prahran called Mount Erica Hotel, and sort of and just working with the people that were so excited and passionate, and even just serving pub food, they loved being in hospitality, and so I ended up quitting my sales job and becoming manager of the pub, and that was quite an experience at the age of, I think, about 25 or so.
Tell us about the period of time of moving back to the Southern Highlands. What lured you back there?
Look, that was a desire of my now wife's. She wanted to be closer to her family, who were in this region as well. So we moved back, and I actually there was a new restaurant that I'd been reading about that was quite exciting. It was called Biota, and so I sort of dropped in my resume and said, if you need someone, I'll be around for weekends while I look for a real job. And yeah, they got me in that weekend, and I think I was getting married in 3 weeks' time, and then going on a month-long sort of honeymoon and trips and that sort of stuff. And it was meant to only work. I told them I was going to be there for a few months or whatever, but it was actually only going to be for a few weeks. And I think at that point I ended up staying for 8 years.
Well, tell us about the switch that you made, because you had such a big role and impact with Biota. Tell us about the early years there and what lured you to join the team there.
Yeah, look, I mean, James Vile's passion for food and for hospitality was undeniable. And so that's what really excited me was and the standards that he had were, I couldn't even reach the standards that he wanted, but I had a desire to want to get there, and so that was exciting, and that drove a lot of my passion towards, I guess, perfection in hospitality, and something that I'd never seen or experienced. Hospitality previously was about having a chat and casually enjoying serving food to people, but I guess taking that to the next level of being so intensely correct and precise, that was actually beautiful, to try to almost create what we termed a ballet each night.
Do you have any stories of that time at Biota and what it was like working there, being part of that team?
Yeah, look, there's probably not a lot of story, what goes on at camp stays at camp, but there, I think there were so many great people that came and went through that kitchen, and so much passion and desire, because every single person wanted to be the best version of themselves, and so it was really amazing to be in that space of dedicated people, and look, it was groundbreaking for destination dining and regional dining, particularly in Australia, and it was really exciting to be a part of that, and to be able to create an experience that was, let's say 80% of people love and 20% of people were pretty challenged by. But I think that was, that was its beauty as well. So yeah, in a way, it's forged a lot of what regional dining is in Australia, and it was before its time, I think. Yeah.
It definitely gave a real sense of place, and was part of that wave of extraordinary regional dining establishments. What sort of role did you play in regards to wine in the front of the house to help encapsulate that?
Yeah, so look, when I joined, I was working casually about 30 to 40 hours, and Marcus Corcoran was the restaurant manager there, and he brought a lot of his wine passion, and he ignited my passion for wine and matching wine, and And to this day, without Marcus, I wouldn't have done anything in the wine industry. I don't think so. He was a big part of building that, and then he moved back to Byron Bay, and I took on the reins there for I think 5 or 6 years, and we were pushing boundaries. We were serving beer on matching wines. We did matching juices and non-alcoholic options as the first thing, and that was again a groundbreaking. These days everybody does it, but at the time nobody was doing it, and it was all about providing what I call occupying the space that nobody else is in.
There was a moment when you brought Biota to the city. Tell us about that adventure, and was it hard translating what you do regionally in that sort of Sydney setting?
Oh, yes and no. I think it was exciting for people that hadn't been able to experience it. Look, it was a huge challenge. We essentially had to double the staffing level quickly, and then we had to manage 2 venues at once, which is I said essentially doubling your workload, but you're also not doing that permanently. So it was tricky to find the staff and the ability to do it, but I think we did it pretty well. It was again, there hadn't been too many pop-ups as such around Sydney, and now the model is pretty easy to follow. But I get also being a couple of hours down the road meant that we had to hire a house in Sydney, and we were away from our families for 4 weeks. But it was fun. It was really enjoyable.
Biota closed a couple of years ago. What was that like? Sort of seeing that disappear, and did it have an impact on you?
Look, I'd left about 12 months earlier, but still, very much in touch with everything that was going on. Yeah, look, it was sad. It was, the biggest stake through the heart was the bushfires. There were literally nobody travelled to the Highlands for a month, and it was a restaurant with high revenue, but a restaurant with high costs as well. And when you can't scale down a restaurant of that size very easily. And so, look, it was sad. But I think still, if you look back and you look at the 11 years of Biota and what it achieved and what foundations it laid for the future, I think everyone who was involved can be proud of what was achieved.
What impact did your time at Biota have on you?
Look, it's really weird to say it, but in some ways it satisfied my desire for it satisfied my ego. To a point where I don't now need the limelight, despite chatting publicly to you today. But I don't have I don't need to do that anymore. So that I've been professionally satisfied at the high end of the restaurant world, that I feel now that I can go forward and provide different things and different aspects, but I'm no longer trying to be, I don't want to create the best restaurant in the world. I don't want to do any of that. I want to provide honest, good hospitality and create a sense of community.
As we sort of mentioned just briefly a moment ago, that Biota closed a couple of years ago. Tell us about the venues that you worked at after your time there, and what was it like sort of stepping away from that model of Biota that you're in into the other venues that you worked at?
Yeah, so because I'd spent so long in one model, essentially, moving into others was challenging but extremely enlightening. After Biota, I worked with the China Doll Group, and we set up. My role was general manager of a restaurant called Chew, which was completely different. That was a 300-odd seat restaurant inside West HQ, or formerly Rudy Hill RSL. So in a way, you could almost translate it to being a restaurant within Star City. It was there was obviously a lot of focus on gambling and the benefits there, which was an eye opener. But that was a huge restaurant with huge expectations. But unfortunately, 5 months in, that's when COVID hit, and I ended up having to sack 40 staff and then myself.
What sort of impact did that have on you and sort of what you wanted to get out of hospitality?
Yeah, look, that was disappointing because I hadn't achieved what I wanted to at that venue. Look, that was it was disappointing, but I think, at the end of the day, there's silver linings to every cloud, and I spent 2 months with government funded, literally gardening at home with my wife and family, and we call it almost a trial retirement, and it was actually great to take a step back and reflect on everything and what the future holds.
Take us through the process of starting your own restaurant with Flower Bar. When did you sort of first start to sort of think about it, and what was the process like of creating your own venue?
Yeah, so that was, I thought about this venue for about 3 years, and at the time that the venue, the previous owners were selling their lease and whatnot. At the time, I was working as a food and beverage manager at a resort called The Lodge in Jamboree. I was, I think, about 8 or 9 months in, and this opportunity came along, and it was, I had no idea. I'd opened restaurants before, but with plenty of money behind. We had next to nothing, and I've been led to believe that by a broker that it would be quite easy to borrow an extra $200,000 to complete this. So we went ahead on that assumption, and that didn't happen. So that was the first challenge. We opened this on a bit of a shoestring, and then and we had about $150,000 worth of works to do and equipment to install, and it was a real challenge, and it was what I call white knuckling. But we're already halfway through, and we just needed to keep going.
With that sort of shortfall of money, how did you approach and sort of get the venue up and running? What did you do to sort of get it to the level that you were happy with?
Yeah, look, we had to cut some corners, and we had to do use finance that was expensive, and we had to I maxed out 3 credit cards and got family, the close family, to borrow on our behalf, and just do our best to make it work. And we got there. We actually renovated the place in 6 weeks, and because I was already paying rent, I had to open it as soon as I could. So we had a designer and a builder and myself working out the plans as we were building and as we were going, and making decisions as we were there. And because of the speed that we had to open, because every week was costing money, we basically we had to pay 3 times as much for furniture, because that was what was in stock and that's what we had to get. So we made some compromises, but I'm really happy with what we've ended up with. It's I don't know what we would have done if we'd have had 9 months to plan, but I'm pretty happy with what we did in 6 weeks, and there's not a lot that I would change. A few things, but you never get it 100% right.
You've had the role of general manager in quite a few venues, but what surprised you about running your own business, and how different is it to running someone else's?
Well, I've always, run other people's businesses as if it's mine. But various things that I've pushed back on over the years, I now find myself saying the same things as the owners that I've worked for, and having a little chuckle and understanding it from that point of view. So that's, I guess despite the fact that you know the finances of it, you actually don't know the impact of the finances quite often, if that makes sense. So I guess whether we call in a plumber or not. Of course you call in a plumber. But, these days we go, maybe we don't, or maybe we hold on next week because what I'm planning to do is get this sink in and then we can combine that and then cheapen what the plumber does. And they're little things that you probably should think about as a general manager, but quite often it's about getting everything achieved as quick as you can. And of course there's money to make that work. But you never know what that capital funds would or could be used for, because that's partly, the owner has a better idea of what's happening there.
You've been around the industry for a little while now. How different is it to 10, 15, 20 years ago? There's so many big groups and not as many independents. How do you see things at the moment?
Well, look, I'm concerned by the industry. I'm concerned by what we call hospitality. In inverted commas, I think recently I went to, let's just say, the entertainment quarter in Sydney, and I went into 6 venues but didn't experience any hospitality. I think it seems like a retail food transaction as opposed to real hospitality, and I think that's my biggest concern with the industry. I'm also not completely convinced that these larger groups are not just growing and leveraging themselves to become another Maryvale without actually the substance. And we've seen many failures over the years. Keystone being the biggest. When every group's tried to grow, or the only one that's grown successfully is Maryvale. But yeah, I'm concerned, and I'm concerned for suppliers that there might be a house of cards coming when, as we head into these economic times, everybody's just assumed that you can make easy money. And yeah, there's probably more in the marketing departments than the actual hospitality on the floor and in the kitchen.
As a small independent, and you've got such a multifaceted business, how do you get on top of things and grow your business and get ahead at the moment in what is the modern hospitality?
Yeah, look, we've gone completely to full service. Some people are frustrated that they can't just. Well, we do let people order at the counter if they want to, but full service is really important, and people aren't really used to it these days because they're so used to having to get a number or a buzzer or a dumbed down version of what hospitality is. And I think for us, that's our opportunity because so few people are offering genuine service and genuine hospitality. And we work towards that. I guess part of what we have is a multifaceted business. So it's nothing for someone to pop in 3 or 4 times a day. They might pop in for their coffee, then they'll pop in for a bite to eat for lunch. They'll engage with buying a bottle of wine for dinner, and it's just really interesting. As I said before, a modern day general store. It's not newspapers and boiled lollies these days. It's coffee, wine, and nice cheeses and salamis.
Well, you're sort of 9-10 months into the business now. What are you loving about what you're doing?
I think it comes down to the sense of community and the way people love what we do, and we love what they do, and we love how they interact with our space and our venue. And this, as I mentioned before, so many people have moved down from Sydney in recent years that they're looking for a venue that might replicate what they might have experienced in Newtown or various wherever they've moved from, and this is, I guess, it is hard to move into a regional area and feel a sense of belonging, and so that's one of our key goals, is to make people feel like they belong to the community in Moss Vale.
Well, Ben, it's amazing to catch up, and look forward to seeing Flower Bar blossom and grow further. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Been great to chat.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep, Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.